Hey guys, Jennifer Hobbs here. And with me today, I have Dr. Emily Jacobs, who is the author of her newly launched book as of last week, Live Your Life. Actually, this week, holy cow, Live Your Life for You, Not Your Mom. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on here.
Thanks for coming on. How exciting that we get to have you on here just after the launch of your book, which I just absolutely love the title of. And we're going to talk some more about that. But folks, if you're joining us today, I just want to say thank you for joining us. You know, as we sit here and we introduce Dr. Emily Jacobs, also, I want you to take a moment to step away, just as we all know. Emily is also a wife and a mother, and far before she ever got that very admirable and honorable title, so much had to happen in order for her to be introduced as such a boss babe as Dr. Emily Jacobs. And so now her life has led her to where she works with integrative health and wellness, as with coaching and helping with the transformational coaching. But yes, again, we got a little bit of words that go kind of like want for people that don't know what that means. But just
Yeah.
think of the words health and wellness as we listen to what your life looks like right now for you. You just launched a book. How in the world, how did that come about? You kind of got these different places in your life. You're the author of this book that you're going to tell us about, but then on top of it, you help to coach others with their health and wellness transformation. And so do the two kind of go together? Does your things that led up in the past lead to both of those? I'm sure they do. So now I'm just waiting patiently to hear it. Let's hear about your journey.
All right. Yeah. So we'll hear about the journey. Yeah. So actually, my background, this is kind of wild too, is my background is I was a nurse, and I know once a nurse, always a nurse, but I was a nurse for 20 years in corporate healthcare. And I loved being a nurse. I wanted to be a nurse. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a doctor. I was so excited. I absolutely was like, oh, this is it. I'm never going to leave. And here's the thing. I ended up changing in different roles in the hospital setting because I feel like I've always known, like when you're ready for growth, your body starts like with the little nudges and then it starts screaming at you. And it's like, it's time, even if it's painful and scary and messy. And you're like, I don't know what this is supposed to look like. I'm comfortable here. But for me, there was just a little bit of growth that ended up happening in that hospital setting. I became an educator in the intensive care unit for about 13 years with a title. It's called clinical nurse specialist, but I'm not going to downgrade it, but most people just noticed us as an educator for the newer nurses and, for the experienced nurses coming on. Then towards the end of my career journey there, I was a director of nursing education for an 8-hospital system, which was insane. But I knew 2 weeks into that job that it was not in alignment with me anymore. And so I stayed for a couple months just to kind of feel it out, because I am not like an early quitter, but I also knew that I did kind of like, if things don't change, then I need to change again. And I, at that point in my life, which was just a year or two ago now, I just realized I only have this one life, right? And I might disappoint people, and that's just going to have to be okay, because even if it's your mom, it's just going to have to be okay. That decision had nothing to do with her, but she passed away 3 years ago this month. So I can kind of go through that journey, but I just realized that, like, I call myself a recovering people pleaser and perfectionist, which I know it never ends, but I'm in recovery, right? So a recovering people pleaser and perfectionist. I really did learn a lot of tools from my mother-daughter relationship. It was a very challenging relationship, but it's ours, and it was our story. And I learned tools through that I was then able to bring in other areas of my life. So I learned how to recognize toxicity very quickly. I learned how to recognize a little bit of bullying, guilt. I'm trying to think of all the other things. And I knew even as a young child that I had control over my choices. So I think just coming full circle, I have 2 young girls of my own. the thoughts of this book happened 7 years ago when other people planted that seed in me, the you should write a book seed. And I immediately followed with, I'm not a writer, like with a laugh, like, you don't know me, I'm not a writer. And yet I have about 7 journals, like literally yearly, just random entries here and there. Some were more committed, some were more frequent, of just things I've learned. And all of it themes around the awareness of choice. Like we can make a new decision any moment of the day. And so fast forward, that was 7 years ago. I just took a couple little notes on those lessons and some things that I've learned. Then I had kids of my own, and my oldest is 5.5. And like last summer, I just realized I'm relearning this now as a parent than when I was a daughter. And I was also the holy, say a bad word. Like, I've got to help, I've got to heal. Like, I've got to continue to work on breaking some of those cycles I didn't love. And honestly, I started having, which was like the epiphany, is I started having gratitude for going through them in the first place, which I did not think that as a kid. I was like, this stinks, right? Why were we dealt these cards and why can't we get out of this? And I truly believe like both people have to think that there's a problem and want to change, because I spent a couple decades trying to change somebody. That will rob you of joy, on top of blaming somebody. That will also rob you of your life and your joy. So I spent a lot of time there. And those were also lessons that I learned because I did it to myself. I also enabled a lot of things too, which of course I think as a kid was easy to do because I was trying to people please. Like I was trying to please my mom, right? So it's like, did she do anything wrong or didn't she do anything wrong? I don't know. I'm not her, and I'm just equipped with different tools than she was. So yeah, I just kind of realized that when I had daughters of my own, I'm like, oh, geez, I got to go back to square one. And then maybe I should probably write that book about choices and awareness and how we can do that. So that's kind of like the huge nutshell of the book.
I love it. And I love that you point out the fact you're like, was she wrong or was she not? Like, it's not even, we don't even need to waste the space on figuring out who's right or who's wrong in situations, but rather it's empowering to get to that point where you realize like you are in charge of what happens at this point. And I think that's where I know, fortunately, like I found myself out of like, like, all right, take some accountability. Like if you don't like the way it is, like change it. And we will always continue to have, unfortunately, like toxicity that might be in our life. And it's to figure out what tools I love. I just, that's fabulous. So did you start to prior to the passing of your beloved mother, did you start to build that relationship? I want to know more about that. Like, as you started to learn tools, did you start to learn them more in your adulthood, in your parenthood with your own children, or was it just both, like learning the tools to use with your mother as well as your kids, and then finding, oh, I'm not taking those over to my kids because I'm exhausting all of them on my mom? What's that look like?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to, so most of our relationship that I can remember as like I'm gonna say young adult. I don't think it started when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager, the overly criticisms, or at least in my brain, because I know that's an opinion, of course, but it just seemed like it was too much. And I think that started when I was in high school. I also started speaking up more in our family. I just more was like the peacemaker, but somewhere hormonally maybe, or just the way high school was, I just started like speaking up. And just kind of the things like I would take so like, I remember I was a perfectionist. So my hair would be perfect and my makeup or whatever for high school. And I'd come downstairs and my mom would just look at me. And you guys know the look. Some of you know this look where it's just like, you're wearing that? And I'm like, what happened to like good morning, or just telling someone they look beautiful just because, like, did you forget what it's like in high school? So that was a daily occurrence. Or, oh, you're gonna wear those jeans that just don't look good on you. And you're like, literally like heart crushing, like great. Now I got to go to high school where, whatever, like I'm already insecure. So long story short, well, I don't know, long story short, this is just where we're at is, I realized, like I said, that I can't change her. Living in blame didn't work. It didn't do anything. It just made it like added fuel to the fire. I literally just, once I had my first daughter, I really just realized, and I don't know if it was a connection between my daughter or what happened or being a mom, but I just realized this is the way it's going to be. So I either have a choice to like let it go and like just don't be a part of her life, which that was an option, I'm sure, or accept it with boundaries, which is actually what I did choose. And now that she's passed, I didn't have gratitude then, but I literally have gratitude now.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what that journey was like. So I lived in her last year. She passed suddenly. So but I actually think this is going to be like oddly spiritual. The year before she died, I would like, I don't know if I would like hear things or just like imagine things or thoughts in my brain, but I actually was imagining her not being here for very long. Or like a thought would come up like, she's really not going to be here that long. Like there's these weird things that I'm like, where is these voices coming from? Like,
Mhm.
I thought I was like making it up. I like literally thoughts about a thought would pop in my head when I was driving and it would say, what are you going to say at your mom's like obituary or at her memorial? And I'd be like, what, is she going somewhere? Like I didn't even know where that thought would come from, but something in me was just like, well, now that we're on that subject, maybe this is what I would write about or talk about. And it
Mhm.
was so weird. And that was about a year before she passed. So I feel a little bit, tiny bit of guilt with that, but not really. But that was so weird. So somehow in that year with either those weird messages or feelings, honestly, I really just started letting go and accepting her for who she was, also keeping true to my boundaries. Like at a certain point, if she starts going down that path, I found a way to create healthy boundaries in a loving way. And it 100% disappointed her. And I still did it. And
Mhm.
she eventually got used to it. And I didn't care if she talked to my dad behind my back. I stopped caring. And I know for sure she was like, she's being selfish or she's being, whatever. And I'm like, cool. I just didn't have to hear it this time because I hung up the
Right.
phone with a loving voice that was like, oh, we're doing it. Oh, it's happening again, mom. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And it's like, I just cut it off. So she would at least realize because she would always be like, I don't know what you mean. I'm not mean to you or I'm not this. And I'm like, you don't see it.
Right.
And I genuinely think she didn't see it. So I had to stop getting mad about it because I'm like, maybe she just really doesn't get it.
I feel
So
like that is the situation for other people too, not even just in this exact situation where people are toxic or like saying things to make you feel bad, but in other situations where I don't know, maybe it's drinking or not doing anything, just being stagnant, like to have that conversation with someone, a lot of people can be completely convinced that they're not doing anything wrong. And so drawing healthy boundaries, something I've totally had to learn about over the last like 3 years. And that's been very freeing. And just hearing you talk about it, like what a freeing experience. And I'm glad you bring that up because yet again, like just another thing I would like for listeners and viewers to hear, like, because you get so wrapped up in being that people pleaser. Some of us, before we started talking, as I was saying, I got some irons on the fire that I need to take off. And it's because you try to be a people pleaser. And so those healthy boundaries, some people have no idea what that looks like. And so hopefully, as people are pondering that right now, like, ooh, boundaries, I don't even know what that means or looks like for my life. Hopefully they will start to think about that. So and I kind of know a little bit more about you because I'm privileged to know you through a writing society we're a part of, the Burning Soul Collective. So I am aware of how a little bit of how in the world you wrote and published your book in such a short amount of time. But for those listening and watching, how long did it take you to? I mean, you said you started it. The idea came like 7 years ago. How long was the journey of when you actually sat down and got to it? How long did it take you?
It took me 6 months, which I don't recommend. So we can go into that, but
I agree. It took me about 6 months as well, rather than the shortened time I set for myself. And it was all to do with me and my procrastination. But you continue. What were you saying?
yeah,
You said
well,
you wouldn't recommend it.
so for me, actually, and I'll take it back a little bit. So for me, so I signed up, I invested in this company, right? Burning Soul Collective. And I decided that, well, if I invest in a company, that's going to light the fire under my butt. At the same time, there was a strong call. There was a strong call to action from me. And it was over this past year, not all, many women that I've coached were coming up with similar mother-daughter stories, struggles, feelings. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I actually know, I feel like I know that person because I feel like we had a similar mom. And it was weird. I thought I was alone. My two best friends, their moms weren't like this, at least what they told me about, or they didn't have any problem with even if their mom was like that, but I did. And so it was really weird. It was very isolating. I was like, oh, great. It's just us, right? Nobody else in the world is going through this. And as an adult, I'm finding out more and more people, at least the ones that I'm coaching, when we would talk about stuff, they're like, wow, my mom this and my mom that. And I was like taken back because I'm like, holy moly, like we're all experiencing this. And so there was times I would even say, can I guess what that did to you? Can I guess how you felt later? And they were like, how'd you know that? I'm like, that was me too. So that would kind of all come about at the same time. Like I saw myself bringing in some of the stuff I didn't like. I call it the ugly versions of myself. I brought it from my mother-daughter relationship to my kids. And I was like, I got to stop this. So I signed up. So I invested in myself. I signed up for the company and their program, which was like a 12-week program to write your book, and at least get all the information to publish and promote it and all that. So right before that, they sent out a 30-day write your book in 30 days, like as a challenge. And I'm like, well, I'm committed because I put some money on the table on top of like, I guess no better time than now. So I pretty much wrote nonstop, messy, imperfect, just get the words out, get the thoughts out, get the stories out, just super rough draft in 30 days. I wrote the entire book in 30 days. What I don't recommend though is, yes, I did set aside some time by getting up earlier. I did not slow down in other areas of my life though. And so the lady over here, me, that teaches and helps people get out of burnout, I mean, I burned myself out and I knew it. By about end of September, I thought I would crash by December, and that kind of happened. So I wrote it in the 30 days, the first draft. Then the next month was the next draft, which that was actually the most fun. Because it's like now that I had like 60,000 words on a paper, now I get to like really read through it and dissect it and then send it off to editing, which was like the next month. And then researched and studied like how to publish and all that. So as a first-time author, that pretty much works. I don't know if I work maybe 30 plus hours a week, almost 40. And I have two young kids, like one was starting kindergarten. It was just not the right timing, but it was the right timing, right? So I know myself and I'm really ambitious. And when I put my mind to it, like it'll get done because I'll say it'll get done. But I know that the company that I was working with was like, just saying in general, it can take, you know, what did they say, like around 8 months or so, or you can slow it down and it can take a little bit longer. But if you don't start and you're not intentional, it actually does take that long to go through all the processes. So it's like, it's not just the writing that takes that long. It can take as long as it takes, right?
Yeah.
But if you're like, no, I'm really committed to getting this done in the next 6 months, there's got to be a little tiny bit or a lot of action every day.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to happen. And then in my case, I didn't carve out like the rest time or the slowing down time. And so that is what I would have done differently, is that if you're going to go full steam ahead and you want something out there in the world in like 4, 5, 6 months, where do you need to like pull out some other time? Or take your time and roll something out a year from now, but be intentional. Like every month has to be an intentional thing, or it's just going to sit there.
So in your book, you identify for the reader what kind of tools you use to help with toxicity and bullying and stuff in your life. Do you point them out in there?
Yeah, I do. And I share the stories that I went through.
Mhm.
So again, same thing if it's relatable to someone. And all the lessons, so I put about 10 lessons in the book or just things that I've learned or just ways to help encourage people. But it's things that I kind of learned to really help myself value the life that I have and value my choices, and to help readers understand that like we do have control over that. And it's not always easy. And then, right. So I go through kind of recognizing like guilt and recognizing how it just creeps up in our lives and toxicity, and I gently talk about boundaries and create, how to create them. One of my favorite things to talk about with boundaries is called it's called like, what do I say in it? Basically you say no without saying no. And one of my favorite things to do is to say, and I got this from another mentor, is instead of saying no, right? Because especially if you're a people pleaser, right? Is you say, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for thinking of me and asking me for help. I am so honored or humbled or whatever fits in that conversation. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to take that on right now. My plate's really full, or, whatever, because I hate the word busy. My plate's really full and I wouldn't be able to give my full heart into it. But if you can't find anyone else in about a month, things will get a little better for me. Please come back to me. 9 times out of 10, if they want something done, they're going to find someone else.
Mhm.
They're not going to wait for you. And so there you go. You just said no without saying no.
Mhm.
You said thank you. And that I got from one of my other mentors. And it's just fascinating. I don't use it all the time, but I definitely use it with my kids,
Yes.
which is amazing. Like, how many times do you have to say, no, we're not doing that. No, we're not eating that. No, this.
Right.
And it's a distraction technique, because I'll say, instead of saying, no, we can't have cupcakes every day for breakfast, right? Like they're that small. They're like under 5. Like they don't get it. They're like, but why? But why? Right? I would say, oh my gosh, right? Don't you love cupcakes? What's your favorite? Oh, me too. Let's make cupcakes. So we'll put a date on the calendar where we're just gonna like make them or whatever, treat day or go out for ice cream. Let's go get the calendar. Do you think they get the calendar? Do you think
Mm.
that they will remember that? Like mine are that young. They're not really going
Right.
to. But
Right.
one of them does, and she'll bring it up and I have to stay true to it. I'm like, you're right. I did say over the weekend, cupcakes. Got it. We're on it. I'm like, well, and at that point, I'm like, are we buying them or making them? Like, what are we doing? Right? And then my husband looks at me, he's like, you gave in again. I go, I did not give in. We set a date.
No, your daughter has a great memory.
That's right.
And initiative.
That's right.
I love that in your book you include like your own personal stories, because not only is that a great way for your reader to relate, but for people reading your book or potentially even doubting, sometimes you get in your head and you're like, no, they're not being mean to me. No, it's fine. I'm sensitive. Like then will read a story maybe from your perspective and be like, oh God, I am getting bullied. Like that is what's happening to me. Like that is the negative self-talk going on in my life. And so I think that's great that you put stories in there, because I think sometimes people can downplay what actually is going on when you want to be a people pleaser. So do you have you said you had so many journals there. Do you have plans to continue writing?
Well, I was actually shocked I even did this. So we'll start with the initial shock of, oh my goodness, I can't believe I actually did this. But about halfway through, what was it? My editor, there was parts of my book that she said, I feel like this would be in another book. And at first I'm like, stop that. I'm not doing another book. What do you mean? Like, I got to get it all in one book. Like, it's got to get all in here. And she's like, this sounds like a rant on something else that has nothing to do with your mom. And so then we agreed to disagree. Because an editor is just a suggestion is how I take it. But 99.9% of the time,
I'm like my husband.
99.9% of it, I was like, 100% I'll take your suggestion. But I said, I do want to mention this story, but fine, I won't go on the big long rant about it. But I do want to mention it because it's part of my journey, which was also part of the story. But every time she was like, well, just make sure we tie in, your mom. So there are thoughts in my brain, which means if it's a thought in my brain, it's probably going to come true. So there are some thoughts of doing another project, but nothing, obviously nothing has started yet. I am for sure going to do the opposite of what I normally do, which is actually like breathe and enjoy this. I've never done anything like this before. And I don't, sometimes when we're always looking for the next thing, it's hard to enjoy what we have. So there are thoughts, they're in there. I'm assuming they will probably, come to fruition when the timing is just like urgent. And I'm going to try to wait and listen for that when it's like, this message needs to come out, like you need to write about it. So I'll put it out there. There's thoughts. I do have plans right now. Hopefully my Kindle ebook version will be uploaded appropriately. That did not go as well in the launch, so it's coming. So if anyone's that kind of reader, just sit patiently. I mean, it's hopefully sooner than later. And I would love to record an audio of my book. That is my goal before the end of the year. So I'm really hoping for the summer, so I have some space to work on that.
That's awesome. See, I got so excited about that. Now I forgot. Oh, I want to come back in a moment to what you were saying about like wanting to take some time to just breathe. But before I do, there was a question that I had when with your first book. Oh boy. All right, I might have to come back to it because I don't want to sit here and stall. When it comes to just breathing and giving yourself that space to do that, I feel like that's something that a lot of us get. We don't make a priority and we put it on the back burner because life is just so busy. And I think it is a priority and it needs to be at the front of not the back burner. And so for yourself, what other than deep breathing, and journaling, like what do you do for yourself for your own like self-care, like just for Emily and your physical and mental health, spiritual health?
Yeah. Well, and I have to tell you a funny story about the word self-care, and because I teach this and I talk about it. I grew up in the family that self-care was selfish, right?
Oh,
So maybe this resonates with some people because they're probably like, yeah, it is. Or it's just one more thing on my to-do list that I have to do now. So I
right.
I even knew this as a kid because I questioned my mom about this. Why don't you do anything for yourself? And I also remember saying this to her, why don't you do anything to take care of yourself? So I knew, and I've switched the wording when I do some presentations now to scratch out self-care if that word just haunts you and replace it with taking care of yourself. So some people that if your mindset is self-care is selfish, which I know is not everybody, then when you say taking care of yourself, usually sounds essential. It doesn't sound selfish when you do it that way. So if you're one of those people and you needed to just switch the words around, feel free to do it. But essentially it's self-care, yes. So what do I do to take care of myself that is now like a hard stop? Nobody really messes with it unless it's an emergency. I love exercising. It gets my energy out. It gets my brain to stop thinking. That's what I love about the exercise programs and things I do for that. So just like at the gym, weights, whatever aligns with me. And I love pushing it. I love pushing myself and challenging myself and, causing it to hurt a little bit because I feel like that's where growth happens when it gets a little uncomfortable. So exercising, I wake up about approximately an hour before my family. Well, my husband does too, but he goes downstairs. I stay upstairs. We kind of have our quiet space to wake up on our own. That was not something we had for a while. And it's just really nice that I'm not just hitting the ground running. Even if I'm tired, even if it's sometimes I'll sleep in just another 10 minutes, but I don't waste that 45 minutes to an hour for myself. I don't waste it. So I was trying to be really intentional with like 3 or 4 things, like do this, but sometimes I just have to feel what aligns with me. So I do at maximum, like 7-8 minute guided imagery meditation. So I have like a little app that I use and I say at maximum because I get all fidgety. and I can't sit still. Like I'm trying to wake up too. So I'll deep breathe, I'll do those things. And then sometimes I'll do like a little gentle stretching while it's finishing up, because I realize that sometimes I just need to hear this beautiful, beautiful sounds or whatever, but I can still move my body. So, sometimes I read, sometimes I journal, and sometimes I do a little bit of work, which I'm really trying not to do at that intentional time. But that's the things that I really try to intentionally now to take care of myself, is to try not to overbook things, and to allow, if I do overbook, because I get super excited about what I'm doing some days, I try to find space in the next day or two for recovery and block it. That is a challenge. That's a work in progress. I'm not great at it yet, but I'm working.
I'm working on that as well. Someone had mentioned recently, like, maybe try time blocking. I'm like, okay, let me put it on my to-do list to make a time block schedule. I remember the other question I was going to ask you, which is actually perfect, a great way to wrap it up. You were mentioning the different positions you had in the nursing field prior to writing your book, and moving into integrative health and wellness coach. What was the like end all be all shift? Like, what did that when did that happen? I know you said like you started to feel as though you were being pulled and had purpose somewhere else. Like, but what exactly, when did you get to the point like, okay, this is how this transition's gonna look?
I honestly think it started in 2017 after my first daughter was born. And I can't explain it. So I wish I could. I actually was that confused then. I'm like, something's shifting in me, and I have a different purpose. And I remember people would be like, well, yeah, you're a mom. And I'm like, and then another purpose. I'm like, there's something else too. It's a mom and something else. So I felt myself in 2017 shifting out of nursing in the hospital world, but I didn't leave yet. That wasn't like, I was like, this is crazy. Why would I do that? That's the only thing I've ever known. So that was 2017. I did make some changes. There was a very toxic experience at a hospital in 2017. Long story short, I think they didn't think I was going to come back from maternity leave. And when I came back, and I'd been there 13 years, running programs, like they had hired help finally. I think they were just like, well, we did fine without her for 4 months. We're going to run her out. Like, I believe it in my heart. So I remember even going to HR, like they took long story, won't go into that. So I just realized like, wow, they can just rip that off of you whenever they want. So we ended up moving out of that state and moving back to my hometown. And I went back to a job I was comfortable and familiar with for 3 years. But it did rob me of joy. And I felt bad because I'm like, I'm good at this job. I get paid well. I have a great manager. I mean, nothing was wrong and everything was wrong at the same time. But I did have gratitude for what it did give me. I just was like, something's missing. Then the pandemic hit. We had another baby. Still something in me was just like, there's something else out there. So I got promoted and took that leadership job where I knew this is not okay. That nothing in this was like okay behavior, right? Because I grew up with not okay behavior. So of course I'm going to recognize it I was like, oh, heck no. And different toxicity, but similarly enough, I'm like, I can't work for this company or this person. Like, it's just not in alignment at all with me. And I need to be true to myself and not care what other people think, which, by the way, even if someone was disapproving or disappointed, it doesn't last very long. And I lived with that person almost, my early life. So I was like, well, she had passed. So no, I mean, she wasn't going to be mad if I left that job, but I just wasn't afraid to disappoint anybody anymore. So yeah, the stars completely aligned. At the same time, I realized I just have to believe in myself. I had in the background had went through a coaching certification program. I knew I was meant to do that. I was just too scared to take a leap out of a corporate job. Then a lot of the straws that broke the camel's back, all of them happened. I even said, if this, then I'll quit. If this, then I'll quit. And if this, then I'll quit. Well, it's like, boom, boom, boom. They all happened. I don't know if people believe in like manifesting or whatever, but yeah, somebody heard me and they said, oh, we'll make all those things happen so that it forces you to quit. So yeah, I mean, I don't call it quitting. I call it the best experience of realizing my worth and my passions, right?
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
finally
I mean,
giving yourself permission to feel however you want to feel, to love and to do whatever it is you want to do. Because, like you said at the very, very, very beginning of this show, like you only live once, you only have one life. And it's so important for us to choose what it is that's going to make us happy. And what is, and the best example that we could be for our kids, like showing them that you can do that. You could step into that space. I love that. Okay. So finally, if someone wants to scoop up, let me restate that. As everyone gets off of here and they go to scoop up your call, or I mean, to scoop up your book, Live Your Life for You, Not Your Mom, where all, other than just Googling it, and we'll put it in the show notes as well. Where can they find it?
so they can find it on Amazon right now. It might be at the other online retail stores like Barnes and Noble and stuff. I'm just not 100% certain yet, but you can just search it and see if it's there. But it's definitely on Amazon today. You could buy it today. You can find me. My website is dremilyjacobs.com. So just dremilyjacobs.com. I'm on Instagram. That's also my Instagram handle. And I think that's it. Yeah.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because that was my next question. Like, where are people going to stalk you right after they buy your book in 5 minutes? Well, Emily, thank you so much for coming on today, and telling us about your journey and how you found it in you to change the way that the past and change the future, rewrite the future, and use your struggle to overcome, to celebrate it. So thanks for sharing that with us, and good luck in everything. So many blessings.
Thank
And
you.
I am so taking the advice on the how not to say no. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for listening.